Hello, BookTube, and we're back with Desert Island Books. And my first guest is Hannah from Hannah's Books. And I really do need to get the theme song of, because you did that when you shared the scheduled one of the Gilligan's Island, but it's probably copyrighted. But maybe if we just do a snippet.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Mark's
bet
here.
a short bit would work.
Yeah.
Hey, Mark.
So we got two already, but maybe we'll just wait for a few minutes. But people can always watch this after. And the usual pattern is, and I think it works, is you tell us or me and everybody something about yourself, about your channel, and then we go on from there. And hopefully we'll get questions about the books and everything else. Oh yeah, there's 5 now watching. That's great.
Yay.
So if you want to go ahead.
Sure. My name is Hannah, and I'm from the Washington, D.C. area, which is kind of an intense area right now because of another Washington, D.C. area resident. So going to a deserted island sounds rather appealing right at the moment. By training, I'm an historian. Oh, I guess I should first say that while I live in Washington, D.C., I was raised in the South, and my family was all Southern from generations back. And then I went to college in New England. I married a New Yorker. I have in-laws in Florida. So I'm sort of covering the East Coast of the U.S. at this point. By training, I'm an historian, and I've written a couple of books, and I was a professor for many years. And now I am not. So I write book reviews now, and I do a lot of academic editing for freelance work, and I read.
Yeah, when you say book reviews, are they new books or do you?
Yes, I read. I write for Open Letters Review, which many booktubers write for, and a few other print and online journals. They're all forthcoming books. I review fiction and nonfiction, but primarily nonfiction. I sort of specialize in reviews of biographies of literary figures or artists or things like that. But I also review a lot of history. And in fact, I have a book that I am got to turn in my review today and tomorrow morning early, first thing tomorrow, that I have to finish up.
Well, thanks for taking the time to do this.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. It was a great break.
Let's just catch up because Mark was here, Richardson reads, Gavin, Genre reads, Joseph D, hello, Amy, Dusty Bookshelf, hello, and the Spaminator. Haven't seen Spaminator for a while.
I only know the Spaminator through Steve's live streams. So, yeah.
Yeah, and he usually shows up for Mind a Case, but I haven't seen him for a long time. And Pat from Book Chat with Pat. And guess who's here?
Speak of the devil.
So yeah, and then so you have a BookTube channel. If people don't know, then they should know. But you have a BookTube channel. You've had it for quite a while. So what kind of things do you do on your BookTube channel?
Well, I've had it for about 5.5 years now, which is pretty wild. I tend to talk about backlisted books, classics, but also books by authors that have not necessarily become classics, but whose books still matter to the conversation. I don't read much contemporary fiction, like really contemporary fiction. I love to do tags, which is something I never expected to do. When I first started, I thought I would never make a tag, but I really enjoy that conversation with other people now. And I like looking back on books I've read, long before, which tags often ask you to do. I haven't been incredibly consistent for the last 2 years, probably. My husband was quite ill and died. And during that whole process of his illness and then trying to get back to life, it took me a little while to become more regular. And then a few other little things happened and I got busy. But I'm trying to get restarted right now to post a little more regularly.
Yeah, that's what I find the difficult thing is posting regularly. And it's like, just go back to Steve's one here. It says that you add to open letters.
That's very kind.
And
it's a pretty classy joint.
And Amy says that Hannah's channel.
Thank you, Amy. I watched Amy's version of this not terribly long ago. When I was going, after you invited me, I thought I'm going to catch up on these again and make sure I remember how they work, and watched Amy's and realized that we have a book in common.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember that one, but we'll see which one that is. Yeah. Just what we'll do is I'll catch up with the comments here, and then we'll go back to the comments after we do each book, and then see if there's any questions. So if you have questions or comments about the book, please put it up, but we won't get to them until we're finished the little discussion for this. So, and Spaminator saying, speak of the devil indeed, how's Steve? So the idea again, if everybody has forgotten, you choose 8 books that you would take to a desert island. It's an interdimensional island, so there's only one island. Everybody's on there, and everybody's still on there. And you take one piece of music. It can be an 8-track if you want to, and we won't worry about how you play this. You just are able to.
Yes.
And
yes, indeed.
And there's a luxury item, which I get to know what the books are and the music is, but I don't get to know what the luxury item is, because I think that's kind of fun to know for myself. So, but we'll start out with the first book. And Jenni's here. So yeah, we'll jump into the first book. Hi, Jenni.
Well, actually, before I get to the first book, I just wanted to say that if I were actually going to a desert island for an extended period of time, I would probably take things like the Norton Anthology of English Literature and the Norton Anthology of American Literature and Global Lit and poetry, just huge anthologies of a lot of classics. And I would definitely take Shakespeare and the Bible, and probably something like the Shahnameh and maybe the Tale of Genji, long books that I haven't read yet.
Yeah.
But I don't have anything to say about most of those books. And so I am limiting myself to only one of those, which we will talk about when we get there.
Okay.
But so I'm choosing books that I have stories about. And many of which I know that I can read over and over and over again and have loved for many years. That's not true of every single one of them, but most of them it is. So the first one is Emily Dickinson. Is this the right direction for you?
Yeah, that works. Yeah.
Great. And I chose Emily Dickinson's poems for a lot of reasons. One, this book is one that is one of my oldest books that's actually at my house. A lot of my childhood books are at my parents' old house where my brother lives now. But this one has come with me. There is a newer version, and this is just a cheap old paperback that I've had since I was, 14 or something like that. And I know many of the poems and love them, but I don't actually know all of them very well. I mean, I've read them all, but some of them are less known. So I think it would be kind of exciting to get to spend a lot of time. Can I share one of them?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I wanted to say that one of the main reasons that I thought of this book first was not my love for it, although that is true, but because you can sing every single Emily Dickinson poem to the theme from Gilligan's Island.
Are you really?
I am not. And I'm a terrible singer, but I'm going to try, especially with this very appropriate poem. There is no frigate like a book to take us lands away, not any coursers like a page of prancing poetry. This traverse may be poor as take, with oppress of toll. How frugal is the chariot that bears the human soul. So that'll keep me amused, at least.
I don't think I'll ever read her poetry without thinking that now. I just will never.
I hope people in the comments will list some other tunes that fit, because she writes in ballad form. Just a huge number of songs, traditional songs especially, but also other songs that fit. Yeah.
So where did you first encounter her? Like, was it as a child, as poetry, or in school, or?
Mm-hmm. No, I learned nothing in school until I went to college, which is a long story. But my mom was an English teacher, and my father loved Emily Dickinson. And so her books, my mom's books, were on the upper shelves of my bedroom bookshelves. And so all of the books that she had taught, she stuck up there, because there was no room in our house for any more books, and except in my childhood bedroom. And that quickly ran out. But so I read a lot of things because of those books, that I would just climb up and choose something randomly whenever I could find something. I think this book was a gift from my father, one holiday, a birthday or something. But yeah, I don't have a lot of memories of reading it when I was young, but I read it a lot in college. I took a poetry class in college, and a writing poetry class in college, and I quickly found out that I was no poet, that what I was a good editor of my friends' poetry. And the other thing was that I loved to read poetry. So yeah.
That's cool. I was looking at the condition of that. Keep that away from Steve.
Yes. Yes. There's a newer edition that may have an extra poem or two in it. Steve may know that. I know that there were publications of her letters, for example, that have got slightly extended. So that may be true of her poems. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I haven't read that much of her, but I do like her, and I don't. Again, there must be a good biography of her, and Steve would probably know that. But she never married, did she? She never married, I don't think. Yeah, and I remember seeing pictures of her. It's always that one picture, that one photograph. She looks like she's like 16 years old, but I don't know how old she is in it. But she looks really young, and she was.
Yeah, I don't know how old she is in that really famous picture, but she did not live to be terribly old. No. There are a lot of biographies of her, and there was a new collection of her letters that came out very recently that was just wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I could take all of them with me, I'd be thrilled.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. Like, we need to go on this thing. We just need to rebind all these books into a big book. That's just wonderful.
Oh, wouldn't that be lovely?
Yeah. So we'll go through, because we're getting a lot of comments here before we move on. And Gareth, before we started.
Hey, Gareth.
Yeah. Hannah, everyone in the chat. Yeah. Thanks. Decided to do it live for a number of reasons. And Gareth started doing a film series as well. But you didn't continue it. You only did one or two, I think. So you haven't continued it. And Pat says she has that same paperback edition. Had it since 1982. Wow. And Pat's been doing a lot of stuff. Like you mentioned, this was stuff that your mom taught. Pat's been doing an interesting series of books she loves.
Those are fantastic. What a perfect addition to BookTube. I mean, Pat is herself, but especially that particular series is just wonderful.
Yeah, we'll hear more about that at some point. I haven't spoken to her, but I'm hoping she'll be a castaway at some point.
Oh, that'll be great.
And Jenni, yeah, the book's older than her. Youngsters, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I never. I've heard something that somebody said that they could do some poets to songs, but I never heard that. I don't think with Emily Dickinson. Uh, awesome reading. That was great. Very nice. If we're all stuck on the island together, Anna
Oh,
can sing us for her Dickinson. Yeah.
it would
Well,
help if I could carry a tune. So.
well, the thing is, it's developed. Like I say, it's an interdimensional island. So how you get there is through an interdimensional port. So portal. So therefore, there has to be some probably connection.
Yeah, or maybe a frigate like a book that
Yeah.
might. Yeah.
Great. I'll never read Emily again.
Sorry, Span.
Oh, you never seen Gilligan's Island? Oh, wow.
I don't think I've seen much of it either.
Oh,
even though I was quite young enough for it. So.
Yeah, it was a mainstay of repeats when I was a kid during the 70s. It was just always on.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I grew up in a household with no television. And so I saw things when I was visiting friends, but pretty much never did at home. So.
We had a television, but we had no electricity.
Oh.
That might need some explaining.
Did you have a bicycle where you could pedal it and it would make energy or something?
Car 12-volt batteries that would get charged. And we had this little black and white television. And one of the, we had antennas, but the best one was an old bed springs. Was the best antenna that we could get the best channels from.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, technically, we had an old black and white TV, little portable one, up on a shelf somewhere that my parents would pull down for special events. So my very first memory is, in fact, watching the first moon landing when they were. I did watch the first one, but I don't remember it. But when they were coming back, I was 2.5. And they landed in the water, and I understood the water because we lived at the coast. And so I remember that huge splash. And they watched Watergate incessantly. So it stayed plugged in for a while during Watergate.
Yeah, like I said, we watched TV, and listened to a lot of radio. That was thing, because I remember my dad had an old blue Bakelite radio, and he used to listen to BBC World Service, and he always listened to one thing he really liked was Paul Harvey.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
My grandmother liked Paul Harvey. Yeah.
Yeah, so I grew up listening to that and Alistair Cook's, Letter from America through the BBC World Service.
Mm-hmm. It was NPR for us.
Yeah. See, we couldn't get that there when I was a kid. I didn't get any of the public television stations like until I was older, until I was in my maybe 13 or 14 or something like that. When I was really young, it just the signal wouldn't get there. We get some Detroit stations, and that was it. Gareth saying that his luxury was a guitar, so yeah, he can accompany. Yeah,
and Gareth can carry a tune too.
And Mark says he remembers watching the Apollo missions.
Yep.
And Jenni says she missed so many interesting things being born in the 80s.
Yep. Yeah. My brother is almost 8 years younger than I am. And it's always fascinating what radically different childhoods we had. And he was still significantly younger than you. So.
Yeah, it's because I remember the 70s to like the early 70s to a little bit. I kind of remember, probably if I really think of it, 1973-ish and stuff, I would have been, what would I have been? I would have been 7 years old and that, but I wasn't interested in a lot of stuff at that point other than just not going to school and, running around in the bush, and that was it.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Spamaneer says, I mean, seriously, they can build a radio out of coconuts that's split up, but they can't build the boat. Yeah, that's the TV.
We know where our priorities lie.
Yeah, but you had Marianne was there though. It's always the professor and Marianne, but yeah.
Yep.
And yeah, Jim Backus. Oh, the very politically incorrect cartoons that the Mr. Magoo cartoons.
Oh my goodness.
He voiced. Very inappropriate for today.
There are. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, and radio. Yeah, well, they did everything, and they always had change of clothes. Mrs. What was it? Was it Hathaway? What was it?
I can't remember her name.
Yeah, but she had jewelry, and she was always like, they always had to change of clothes. Other than the skipper and Gilligan are always wearing the same, and maybe the professor, and probably, but yeah, Ginger and the rich couple, I can't remember their name. Always had change of clothes. Howell, that's it. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. They always had clothes and jewelry.
I'm sure they had a bigger suitcase than I will have with me, or fewer books, perhaps.
Yeah, Ginger, Marianne. Okay, fine. Marianne gets a pass for reasons. Okay, well, that's enough Gilligan's Island talk. What's your second book? Or were you finished with that one?
Yeah, no, I think so. I have a very little slender one, 84 Charing Cross Road, which I figured poetry and letters. This one I've loved for a very long time and read every single year and have for at least a decade. But had read many times before, and it gives me such a feeling of comfort, but also companionship. That reading these letters and thinking maybe I could write letters while I'm on the desert island. I'm not sure how they would get sent, but this is the story of a woman writing. At some point, I had a copy that said it was a love story between a woman and a bookstore, and I thought that was such the perfect picture of this woman who loves reading. She's American. She's fresh and brave and funny. And she starts ordering books from the UK, from a small used bookstore with lots of classics. And
Mark's Co, I think, was the name of the shop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that's right. Eventually she starts sending them presents to help them get through times of rationing. And she never actually gets there. That might be a spoiler, but this is a friendship created with especially the one person at the bookstore who's writing to her most significantly, but also with everyone else there. And it always makes me happy to read about her love of great books, but also her ability to make connections through words on a page. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
love it, and letters as well. Amy and I were just talking because we're reading some books about books, and there's this one talking about people buying a book and then maybe taking it back a year later, and the bookseller accepts it, but I remember, I'm pretty sure, isn't there something they send her some books and like he says, I think you might like this, in the letter to her, and just sends her books without any payment.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And if you don't
learned her taste. Yeah. And occasionally she'll say things like, "How dare you send me that Vulgate Bible," or whatever.
Yeah.
And she's got this very American New York style, and he's this very soft-spoken, gentlemanly, sweet man. It's just lovely. And there's a film version, which is also really wonderful.
Anthony Hopkins, I think, is playing. I can't remember who played her. I can't remember. Geraldine Page? No.
I can't remember her name. I think she played the mother in the original film version of the Waltons as well. Am I remembering that correctly?
Patricia Neal. That would be Patricia Neal. Then yeah,
I think that might be right. Somebody tell us in the comments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark was just saying, Thurston Howell III for Gilligan's Island. So again, how did you come across this originally? Like, did you just find it, or somebody tell you about it, or?
I think someone in college recommended it to me, just a friend, and I picked it up and or borrowed it or something and read it and absolutely adored it and knew my mother would, and assumed she probably already knew it. So when I went home for the holidays, I brought her a copy, and she did not know it, but she absolutely loved it. And so suddenly it became my go-to gift, because it seemed like so many people who in my life who were really bookish people didn't seem to know it, and then always immediately loved it. And so yeah, I discovered it in college, and yeah.
The one thing I dislike about it is it's too short.
Yes.
It's too short.
Well, I started reading it on New Year's Day. I probably could figure out when it was, but at some point, in the DC area in my town, I have this little gaggle of 5 or 6 families that have spent New Year's Eve together every night for ages, and we all sleep over at one of our friends' houses after staying up all night, and then have breakfast together the next morning. And I'm kind of an early bird, so I always bring some little book with me that I can read before everybody else wakes up. And so one year I brought this, and it was such a perfect read, and just the right length for the amount of time I had, and then just a perfect way to start a new year of bookishness. Of sort of, I think Sarah at Hardcover Hearts at some point said that she was going to do the same thing, and so I jumped in and said, "Oh, I do that." And the way she frames it is always, it's the perfect way to start a book, a year that promises good books.
That's good. Yeah. Mark, I'll just jump ahead to Mark's here. It was Anne Bancroft, I guess.
Thank you. Yes, that's right. It's Anne Bancroft.
And he said previously, a great movie. Yeah. Amy was saying she loves 84 Charing Cross, and started her to read Samuel Pepys thanks to 84. I don't remember the Pepys. There must be a reference in there, but I don't remember that.
There's so many books in here that when I first read it, I had no idea about. I knew American fiction. I knew British classics to a fairly significant degree that were 19th century, especially if they were written by women. But there was so much I didn't know. And she reads very different books from that. She reads a lot of nonfiction, and so I learned a lot.
Well, it's another.
Although it does. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say there's another one that I really like, and to me, I think of them together as The Bankrupt Bookseller, which is a fabulous book, or the both of them are.
Let me jot that down.
Yeah, it's a fictitious thing of where this guy is writing sort of a journal about starting a bookshop, and he's next door to a tailor or cloth merchant in England here, and things aren't going well, and things don't end well for him, but it's fabulous. And he talks about the books that he gets in and all this. It's just fabulous. And it's couched in the fact that the draper next door, the clothing merchant next door, finds all these letters or diary pieces and decides to, publish them. But it's all fake. But it's just wonderful.
I have it on my list. This isn't the Diary of a Bookseller stuff. This is an older book?
No. This is. It was written in the 30s, I think. Amy's been doing readings from it on her channel.
Oh, wonderful!
It is a wonderful thing, and it's like you could make a list of probably 1,000 books as you go through there. Amy says I gave my mom a copy of the book as well, and she also loved it. It was one of the few books given out vastly different tastes that we have both enjoyed. She agrees that it's too short. Spaminator says, since we're talking about female writers, horror is my favorite genre, and the majority of novels and stories that genuinely gave me the creeps were written by women.
Interesting.
It's Shirley Jackson. Well, I think some of the best 19th century ghost stories too have been written by female writers, and they're really good.
Who is it that's reading Wharton's ghost stories right now? I've forgotten who.
Oh, yeah, I'm not sure.
I've been so behind on BookTube lately, but some friend of mine is reading Wharton's ghost stories, and I think it's BookTube, but it might not even be BookTube. But,
there's another one. I can't remember her name. That she actually started the Egyptian archaeological or the Egyptian Exploration Fund. I can't remember her name. If Mark's still here, he probably will remind me. But she's written stuff and some really good ghost stories as well. But she started, as I say, the Egyptian Exploration Fund.
Wow.
Archaeological stuff. So, Amy says, she's been reading The Bankrupt Bookseller aloud.
Well, I will definitely go check that out.
Amy? Is it 20s or 30s? I can't remember now. I think it's probably... It's set before World War I, I think. But I can't remember when it was written. And Pat says she's read Wharton's ghost stories in December. Yeah, there's so many that are good. There's a collection too. No, not Gertrude Bell. Amy says it was written in the 30s. I can't remember the woman's name, but they're really good. If you just look up who started the Egyptian Exploration Fund, I'm sure you'll find it.
That sounds like fun.
But there's so many writers that were in the Victorian period that did ghost stories that I think were just absolutely fabulous, but they sometimes don't get reprinted. That's the thing. There's some that are really good. Like Edith Wharton definitely does, and a few others. I was trying to think, she edited a series in the 20s and the 30s. She's from a sort of society family, and she wrote some ghost stories as well, but she edited a group of a number of volumes of ghost stories in the 20th century. Oh, I'd be dangerous if I had memory.
I'm the same way. Yeah, I can never remember anything.
Cynthia Asquith. Lady Cynthia Asquith.
I have seen that name around.
Yeah, she did some really good collections of ghost stories in the 20th century. Mr. Jones by Edith Wharton is one of my the creepiest ghosts. Yeah, they're fabulous. Oh, the omnipotent Poobah is here. 84 Charing Cross Road has changed recently. It used to be really crammed downstairs, but recently all the shelves have thinned out. There are still 351 copies of Kingsley Amos's memoir, of course.
My goodness.
There was a bookshop that was in Cleveland that called themselves 84 Charing Cross Road, from this. And I used to meet them in the early mid 90s at book sales in Canada. And they had a really nice shop. I don't know if they're still going. And it was a husband and wife team. But yeah, it was a nice shop, and they were in Cleveland.
So Charing Cross Road is still a bookshop?
I don't know. I don't think it's Marks and Co. shut up long ago. I think there might be somebody else. It would make sense if the address somebody would take it over. But wasn't Foyle's on Charing Cross Road?
I don't know.
There was another famous bookshop there, and I can't remember what that is.
One of the oldest bookshops in Boston is now a McDonald's or something. I can't. Again, with memories, if I had a memory, I would remember what it actually is, but it's something horrendous like that. And it's like, oh, you can't do that to this, beautiful old building with such a history. But yeah,
Mark has come to the rescue. Amelia Edwards. she's the one that did the Exploration Fund and some really great ghost stories.
Okay,
Quinto?
jotting that down too.
No, I don't think Quinto is what I'm thinking of. 84 Charing's Cross is a McDonald. Oh, jeez.
Oh God. Yeah.
It's like in Toronto. There was a nice old. It was a new bookshop. It was called Britnell's. It was at Bloor and Yonge, just north of Bloor, and it was. And then they built the huge Metropolitan Toronto Library there. But it was always a beautiful place, small place. I always went in, and it closed at some time in the early 2000 or mid 2010 or something, and they opened up and it was a Costco, or not Costco. What's the coffee place? I said Costco, but
Starbucks or something.
Starbucks, yeah, something like Starbucks or something like that. And I go, oh, jeez, because it was the oldest thing. It was there since the 1880s, I think, as a bookshop.
Yeah.
And I remember frequenting it in the 80s. I remember buying stuff there. I remember ordering specifically the last journals of David Livingstone, 2 volumes, and it was $50, and that was a huge amount of money in the 80s. But I wanted it. I saved up for it, and it's just these things, and it's just all gone.
Yeah. Just heartbreaking.
James is here, quaint and curious.
Hey, James.
So yeah,
he missed me singing.
Sorry,
I was telling James that he missed me singing.
Oh yeah. Well, he can watch it again. Everybody should watch it again after.
Knowing that that's out there on the internet forever is just terrifying.
So okay, well, let's go on to the third book.
Well, I think I'll show you Jane Eyre.
Well, that's a nice cover,
isn't it? I took a class on Jane Eyre last year. As it wound up, I actually had to miss a lot of it. But the teacher requested that we use this particular version. It's the Modern Library version. I think it's Modern Library.
Oh.
Yeah. Paperback. But because of the introductory stuff, but also I was thinking there were essays at the end. Yes, there's some commentary at the end with George Saintsbury and Elizabeth Rigby and Anthony Trollope, etc. And it wound up being just a couple of pages. So, I mean, I probably shouldn't have bought it, but I did. And I really like the size of the print. My old edition is so yellowed, and it's really stiff as well. It's a I'm not sure why it's so stiff. It's a penguin, but it's apparently from one of the eras when they had more stiffer books. But also the print is a little larger, and my eyes are a little older now. So, so yes, I rather liked this copy. This was probably my real introduction to serious literature, adult literature. Not that it's incredibly adult. It might even be called a YA if it were to come out now, I suppose. But I think it's got just an enormous amount of depth in it compared to the way people sometimes cast it. At the very, very end, there's a very widely quoted line that I don't think spoils anything as long as you don't know who the characters are. But it's "Reader, I married him," and it makes it makes Jane Eyre seem like a book about, a woman who grows up and gets married, and that's very much not what this book is. This is a book about an independent woman who stands up for herself and against a lot of odds, and she's someone who, in many ways, starts her life with trauma. Multiple traumas, and watching how she stays strong and tries to deal with that and then overcome some of it is really interesting. And also how she maintains commitment to what she really believes in at assorted moments, and then when she finds the right relationship at the end, which maybe isn't quite true for everybody. We can talk about that if anybody wants to talk about Jane Eyre at some point with me later on, but it's on her own terms. She has chosen a relationship on her own terms where she is an equal, which hadn't been true in her life earlier. So yes, it's a book that has grown with me, that I loved when I was 11 or 12, or I guess 11 probably, and have loved ever since. And I read it an awful lot. So I know that while it might not actually, I might need that hardback cover that I've been dreaming about, but I've worked my way through several, and this one is in pretty good shape. But I can imagine wearing it out if I have to read it even more than I do now.
I just wanted to pull up. He might be gone now, Spaminator. He says he has to cut out early. Got to finish drawing up the schematic for ruining Steve's internet connection remotely. Well, thanks for stopping by if you're still here. Or
it was lovely to see you.
Yes. So, yeah, Jane Eyre. Well, everybody, some people might remember my infamous video about, Jane Austen and the Brontes and a few others.
So have you read Jane Eyre, right?
Yeah. I've read all the Brontes. I've read all of Jane Austen years and years, sometime in the mid 80s. So it's a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, I adore Jane Austen and find her witty and clever. But the books, while I think they resonate with me pretty deeply in the development of the characters, the books do really follow the format of, grow up and find a man and get married. And even when they play around with that a bit, which occasionally they do, or talk about the politics of it, which is really, in the history of it, which is really fascinating, that still fundamentally that is what the story is, and I can see why you might resist that.
Well, I do want to reevaluate them, and I started reading because I was going to do them the Jane Austen chronologically. So I tried with Sense and Sensibility, and I stalled out for a variety of reasons. But I do remember, though, liking like Jane Eyre and some of the others, other than maybe Wuthering Heights so much, but I do remember liking those. And as before we actually first I wanted to know where did you first, and then we'll get to my question, and then about Jane Eyre. Where did you first get this? Again, was that one of your mother's books?
It was one of my mom's books. I was just climbing on this. She may have recommended this one to me. A lot of the books I've read on her shelf, she had no intention of me reading. I don't think she was particularly bothered by it, but they were just stored there. For example, I have a video up where I confessed that I absolutely hated Ethan Frome. Speaking of Wharton, when I was young, and I had totally picked that off the shelf. She did not recommend it, but she might have recommended this one. I was young enough that she might not have. I'm not sure. But yes, I just climbed up on the top of my desk and picked it up off the very top of the shelf and absolutely loved it. And at the time, I didn't realize how much I didn't know about Villette, for example. Wuthering Heights was definitely there. And as soon as I finished Jane Eyre, and I just loved it so much, and I picked up her sisters, and I hated Wuthering Heights. And I think my reason for hating it was not that it was a bad book, or even that it was not my taste, but that it was not Jane Eyre, and I wanted to read Jane Eyre again, which I then turned around and did. And I still, I like Wuthering Heights significantly better than that now, but I still don't like it the way I like Jane Eyre. And I find it really interesting in how it's structured, that the mirroring that goes on throughout is really quite interesting, but it doesn't have that emotional resonance for me that Jane does. I see myself as Jane. Yeah, I think I read Jane Eyre and Antigone and a couple of other books with plain, fierce, quiet women who were fierce at a moment where that just defined what I wanted to be and who I thought I was. And so, yeah, I think those books will always hit pretty hard.
Yeah, and like I say, I have fonder memories of that, and I think I should, when I do pick up a Bronte, I think that's going to be the first one. I was thinking it might be a Villette, but I don't remember it that much. And when I saw it on your list, it brought up some memories of things that I wonder about. And I mentioned about the parts about her being in the orphan, being an orphan and everything. And this is obviously written before Oliver Twist and Dickens. Dickens, I know, went through that himself, so he had that to pull on. But I kind of, in my mind, have that there's a connection of
I would love to know that.
And I don't know. And it's like, probably somebody will say, no, there's nothing there. Or when I read it again and read them both, and I go, well, where did I even think that? But it's just, it came up in my mind because that's the scenes that I remember, like that sort of stick in my mind most, is the orphanage scenes.
Well, I think there are things about that orphanage scene that involve more overt sentimentality than Bronte usually uses, and then that makes the Dickens thing sort of fit too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, maybe there's just, at that time, there's only one way to describe what an orphanage is, and there's going to be similarities, know. And we were trying to think of other ones that have orphanage in it. I just couldn't think off the top of my mind. The only thing I could think of was that it was mentioned was recently that I read the first series of the Mysteries of Paris, the Penny Dreadful, and orphanages are mentioned in there, but they're adults that have come from orphanages and stuff. So that really doesn't work. But yeah, if anybody knows in the comments,
I would love to hear. There was a string of Victorian literature about orphans.
Yeah.
There's a brand new book out in the American market that's a history of and a critique of orphanages or the system of orphanages, the culture that's surrounding orphanages in literature specifically, I think, or culture more broadly. And it's written by someone that I think was an English major, and I haven't read it, but I'm curious if she talks about Jane Eyre or Dickens. Yeah.
I had a book, and I can't remember. That sort of just reminded me of it. It was a slim book about letters and I'm sure it was an American. It wasn't British. It was an American, like women who have had given up their children to orphanages, and they wrote letters to their children. I don't think they ever saw the letters, but this was a collection of the letters, and it was amazingly good. And I'm pretty sure it was a reprint at AMS Press, but I don't remember anything else. And I have occasionally looked for it because I'd love to read that again. And again, if anybody knows, please let me know, because it's driven me nuts over like the decades trying to remember what it is, and it's just one of those things I just don't remember. But Amy's saying here, Jane Eyre was the second Bronte novel I read when she was 14. Still one of my favorites.
What was your first? I guess Amy can't talk back.
Yeah. I'm guessing probably Wuthering Heights. Or no, yeah, probably Wuthering Heights. Because that was taught
the most common.
In Canada, it was taught. It is a book where our perspective of it changes over time, especially if the first.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing. That's why I wanted want to reread some of the stuff to see. And it's
Right.
just, I think I made the mistake of going to Sense and Sensibility first. I think that was the biggest mistake.
Well, there's such a difference between Austen and then the Brontes from the later period.
But even
of Austen,
Sense and Sensibility and the other books of Austen are very different. And I just think it was probably not the best place for me.
I when I first read it, I liked Sense and Sensibility more than Pride and Prejudice. And I think it's because I wasn't yet particularly interested in the romance. And so having the relationship between the sisters really, really appealed to me. That changed over time. And Emma, of course, is also one of my favorites of hers as well. But Pride and Prejudice is the top, I think. I don't know. It changes every day which one I rank top.
B-roll books. Sat down for a Sunday afternoon snack and discovered Hannah talking about Jane Eyre on the Legendary. Well, if it's Legendary, I'm glad.
Getting me to stop talking about Jane Eyre is always hard.
Omnipotent Poobah, Jane Eyre is a great choice. It would survive all the rereadings that Desert Island would entail, unless it was Steve's copy. Read Pride and Prejudice last year, almost died of boredom.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's funny that my husband was not a reader particularly until after we were married. And at some point, our son and I were trying to convince David to read Jane Austen. And eventually he tried, against his better wishes, he tried Pride and Prejudice. And he read the first chapter and just was like, this is stupid. Why do you like this? This is just weird. And so if I'm remembering correctly, it was my son who read it aloud to him and said, you've got to hear this to get it. And it took him that long to sort of get what the language was. It was just different enough from the very contemporary language that he knew. And so as soon as he realized that it was all funny, that, we sat next to him, we were all reading in the living room. And for the next 2 hours, he was just laughing hysterically as he read. It's because he got it. It just took a bit, but yes. So you might try giving Steve's read along of Pride and Prejudice a try, where he makes commentary, really flip commentary all along. It's very funny.
Mark at Book Time with Elvis did Jane Austen. I can't remember.
Oh yes, I remember that. That was lovely too. Yes. Oh, and his voice was just perfect for it. He would have,
And Jenny says, never read a Bronte or an Austen. Fake reader.
Doesn't make you fake, but it does mean you still have some good books ahead of you.
Enjoy the series always. Well, thank you. My favorite Austen is Persuasion. That's the one I think he read, that Mark read. Wasn't it Persuasion, I think?
Oh, it might have been.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
I read all her novels as a teenager, and they have stayed favorites.
I think Persuasion is the favorite of a lot, especially older booktubers. That it's a little calmer and about someone who is older, although she's still remarkably young, but she's older than some of Jane Austen's heroines.
And Amy says it was Villette was her first. That's
amazing.
Choice, I think.
3 summer days with Jane Eyre and Villette. Oh, wonderful. Yeah, I read Thomas Hardy like that. I was much older, but I read Tess of the D'Urbervilles in one day and just loved it. And so I read the next Hardy, and then the next, and then the next, and I read everything but Jude, pretty much in a week. Just one book a day. This was when I was recovering from an illness and really couldn't do anything but read, and it was just, I was depressed by the end of the week, but it was a wonderful experience.
Yeah, I've read about 4 or 5 Hardys, and I don't mind sort of tragedy or bad things happen to the characters, but he takes it to the limit and beyond. It's like, here, let's throw some heavy stuff on their shoulders. No, that's not enough. We'll put some more. And they're crushed. No, we'll even put some
Especially
more.
in Jude.
But I do have to, the one thing I do like, going back to poetry, I like Hardy's poetry. I really like Hardy's poetry. I like, at this moment, I'd say I like his poetry much more than the novels. But again, it's about the same time. In the 80s, I read a lot of that stuff, and I left it behind. I stopped reading British 19th century fiction, I think, after reading all of Austen and Bronte. I left it behind for French.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow.
And then I came back recently in the past decade and started reading some Trollope, and I love Trollope.
Oh, yes. You know? Yes. So can you read in French?
No.
I know I know you know a lot of languages.
Not anymore. I only took I did take many years of biblical Hebrew, but don't ask me. The alphabet's burned into my brain, but that's about it.
I can read the Hebrew alphabet, but as long as it's print. But once I get handwriting in Hebrew, it's like I cannot read anything.
Well, this is biblical. Yeah. This was biblical Hebrew, so it's a bit different than the modern.
Yes.
But yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm in general, when I read Hebrew, it's either Talmud or Torah. So, but I don't read well at all.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to read French because everybody knows Les Miserables is, one of my favorite books, and I keep rereading it, and I'm going to continue rereading it. And I'm reading Balzac with somebody else again, like revisiting Balzac and Zola now. So I just love that stuff.
Yeah.
But I did come back though to British, and it's like I've always liked Dickens, and then I've discovered, very late Trollope, because when I heard, I just didn't read his stuff, and I also, it's not British so much, but it is British to a certain extent, is Henry James, and I left him behind. Yeah. But in about 15 years ago, I read Portrait of a Lady, and I started reading some other stuff, and I love it.
Yes.
I love it.
That is a phenomenal. I've only read a few of Henry James's books, Portrait of a Lady and The Bostonians, which I really love as well. Not everyone does, but it just fits a couple of special interests of mine personally. And the Washington Square is on my list for the next month or two. I'm actually taking an online class with the literary scholar Merve Imre. Do you know her work at all? She's kind of a hot new thing, but about Portrait of a Lady that starts tomorrow night. So I'm very excited.
Oh wow, yeah.
Or tomorrow.
I love that stuff, and I want to read more. I'd love to learn French, so that's the thing. And I was given a whole bunch of French books, and I was given a French, like a 19th century Les Miserables, basically saying that you can have these, but you're going to have to learn French. And I said, yeah, I will. I haven't started yet, but I don't know if I'm too late to do that.
I'm guessing not. I mean, as long as you're not trying to, as someone who finds it easier to read, I can't really read in French, but there was a little while where I could read a little bit in French. I couldn't understand it when people spoke it to me, but looking at it and thinking about, especially with any exposure to Latin, that it's not quite so hard, especially if you already know the story.
The only time that I've been able to do anything in French was when I was in university. The archaeological reports from Deir al-Medina, I got them through interlibrary loan because I was doing a project on it, and I was able to actually get the information that I wanted from it because I knew the archaeological terms, and then I figured out everything else, or thought I did anyway. I did well on the paper, so I must have done something right. Mark says here, reading about getting husband hunting is nowhere as near as fun as submarine. That's what I was going to say. Like, I really wonder, are those books generally, there's a female and male thing? Like, are they really set? Like, like, are guys going to really enjoy them as much as women do? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, they're clearly about women's lives. And I don't know that, I mean, they're male characters, and they're male characters with motivations, etc. But fundamentally, these are books about women's lives at the time, and so the idea that it's easy to identify with female characters, and a little harder to identify with some of the male characters, I think, and I suspect that many people sort of read with that idea that this is not about me, but somehow it still, it can represent. So yeah, I can imagine that a lot of male readers would feel like they're not really being invited in.
Yeah, but when I think of that, and then I think, well, that might be true with me, but then I think of another book because somebody else read it. Well, Scott Dennison, we were talking, he read Enchanted April. I love that book.
Uh-huh.
And
yeah.
That, if that held true, I shouldn't like that book.
Right.
But I did.
Yeah. Well, and similarly, I think a lot of books about submarine hunting or whatever, always, sometimes I enjoy them very, very much, but that they never have that same kind of enormous power that some of these books do, and that Austen does. And I suspect it is about, what we grow up being told we are and see links with or whatever.
Yeah. Amy's asking her, where would you recommend to start with Hardy? I was turned off by the mayor of Casterbridge years ago and have never gone back to.
I started with Tesla Doorbells and I loved it. And I know that some people have a lot of trouble with it. My least favorite of his really well-known ones, I'm totally blanking on the woman who has sort of three men in her life. Yes, Far from the Maddening Crowd. Far from the Maddening Crowd. It's supposed to be a little happier, and a lot of people love that one and say that that's the one to start with. And I liked it very much, but I did not love it the way that I loved Tess. I loved Mayor of Casterbridge. Oh, the one with the red man on the. Yes, I have no memory. It'll come to me in a minute, and I'll name that other one. Sure, but yeah, I wouldn't start with Jude, and I wouldn't. Tess is a great place to start, but if you get upset by what's going on.
I'm gonna put this as Return of the Native.
Thank you. Yes. Exactly.
And the Mayor of Casterbridge reminded me too much of episodes in Les Miserables.
Oh, interesting.
Because Jean Valjean is, Mayor Madeleine, it just seemed too close. Like,
I had not thought about that link.
And that was another thing that I disliked, because I go, oh, this is a poor ripoff of Les Miserables. But if Amy, Amy, if you do decide to try Hardy again, let me know. I'll buddy read with you, because maybe we'll prop each other up while we go through and get through it. Joseph D is asking, is your copy of First? I'm not sure what book you're referring to, Joseph. You have to remind me. I've lost the thread there for that one. So I guess we can go on to the next one.
Sure. Well, so I've done poetry, letters, and a novel. So I thought short stories might be reasonable. And this one is by an American Southern writer who I have loved for a very long period as well, Eudora Welty. And these stories, my parents both loved Eudora Welty, and I think a lot of these stories are ones that I knew from a young age, from hearing them, and especially a few of them. The Worn Path is very meaningful to me, but Why I Live at the PO is my very, very favorite of hers. And I actually have a reading on my channel where I read the story aloud. And it always makes me laugh. It's sort of a retelling of, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting everything. I've talked about too many books. The biblical story where the brother comes home and everybody's treating him like he's perfect, and the good son is getting ignored.
Oh yeah, the
prodigal son. The prodigal son.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just blank there. It's sort of a retelling of the prodigal son from the good son's perspective. But it's quite amusing. If you don't know it, then definitely I highly recommend that story.
Yeah, I don't think I haven't read all her stuff for sure. I just wanted to jump now to Joseph. He was asking if I have first edition late minute stuff. I wish
that would be phenomenal.
Yeah, and it's like, I wouldn't be living where I am here now. If I did have it, I'd probably sell it and buy a couple houses. Well, I don't think it's that much, but it's worth a lot.
I bet it is. Yeah.
And Amy just says, yeah, plan for Hardy. Sorry, I wanted to get that before I forgot.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, Eudora Welty. I like Southern writers. We were talking before, and I do want to read more of her. Like I have read a novel, and I can't remember which one it was, but it was the short stories, and I think it was only the one collection. Would you say it was Golden Apples?
Golden Apples.
Yeah.
Curtain of Green is really wonderful too. Yeah, Golden Apples is that the full name? I think it is.
It's connected stories. I think they're connected.
They're connected, and
And we were talking too that I got to read more of Flannery O'Connor's short stories because I really liked her.
I adore Flannery O'Connor. I mean, Thomas Hardy may make you depressed. Flannery O'Connor may make you panicked about what's happening. So she definitely has a. In fact, I think a Spaminator was the one who was mentioning horror earlier by women. And when I first read Flannery O'Connor, I knew nothing about her background. I was quite young still. And I thought she was a horror writer.
Well, it's Gothic. It's Southern Gothic. It's Southern Gothic,
yeah.
For sure,
But like violent too, and funny at the same time. And then I read her letters. I think I was in, I don't know, I must have been late college or something. I read her letters and loved them. But she's talking all about her Catholicism and how her Catholicism, her like really fierce commitment to Catholicism, is shaping how she sees these stories. That they're about grace, and they weren't horror at all in her opinion. But yeah.
No,
in fact, Stephen King rewrote or did a takeoff, that's the wrong word, of one of Flannery O'Connor's stories, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, I've never thought highly of Stephen King, but now, like doing my CIMAC stuff, I gotta mention CIMAC here as well. But it's like he's referred to at various times CIMAC star. Now he's referring to somebody else I like, and I go, maybe I need to relook at Stephen King.
I think that's the only Stephen King I've read. That one story that I knew was related to Flannery O'Connor. I did watch The Shining in college. They showed it in a cafeteria, so we were all sitting in folding chairs in this big echoey place and watching it, on some pull-down screen. And a friend of mine came up and tapped me on the shoulder during the show, and I'm like, ah! And of course it echoed everywhere. So yes, it definitely was at least a scary movie.
Well, he like at least the filmmaker, who was the filmmaker, 2001 Space Odyssey. I can't think of the director now. But anyway, the director, like the scene, I don't know if it's in the book. I think I've read the book, but I don't remember, where Jack Nicholson, cuts the door open and sticks his head in, Johnny's home. That's right out of The Phantom Carriage from 1919 by a Swedish film that is absolutely fabulous. It's a scene just right out of there, So somebody had watched that film or watched, what's the other more modern Swedish director from the 40s and 50s and 60s that did a lot of stuff, and I can't think of his name now, but he, Victor Seastrom is the one that did The Phantom Carriage. And I can't think of the name, but anyway, yeah, it's a scene where he takes the axe, sticks his head, and obviously it's a silent film, or it's maybe 1922, but anyway, it's a silent film. But he's clearly saying something to the people in the room.
How fascinating! How
Kubrick,
fascinating!
Yeah. Stanley Kubrick, yeah.
Oh, right, gotcha.
Yeah.
And interestingly, the red rum is a reference to Jane Eyre, although he may not know it. But Red Room, and the scenes are, quite parallel, where she's locked in a red room when she's quite young.
Oh wow! Yeah.
So I don't think Stephen King knows that.
And like other short stories, Southern, like I mentioned, which is to a lot of people an outlier, but I really like Erskine Caldwell. I like his short stories, like Georgia Boy. That I used to read over and over. It's one of 3 books that I took to the Middle East with me, because they were both thick enough to sit in a pouch, 2 pouches. It was actually a U.S. Army, I think, ammunition pouch, and it had a pouch, like it had 2 pouches on the one side. So I had Herodotus in the one, and I had Georgia Boy and City by Clifford Simak.
That's an amazing combination. Yeah. That's just fascinating. Wow.
Because those were the ones that I took with me and reread them, like, in the short ones several times. But,
so, had you reread them repeatedly beforehand, or did that happen because you took them?
Well, City and Georgia Boy I had reread several times, and I think I had read, I know I'd read Herodotus at least once before then, but I read it, I think, twice while I was there. And then, I remember sitting at the foot of the Cheops pyramid reading the passages of the Egypt passages from Herodotus. Amazing. And then probably switching to City or Georgia Boy, but it had a bit of a lurid cover, the Georgia Boy. So that didn't go over too well going into or out of Egypt or into Egypt. I can't remember which.
Wow. That's fascinating. Yeah.
But yeah, I like I said before, I did go through a phase of Southern writers. And I want to get, because I want to reread a lot of this stuff, and there's so much I want to reread. I wanted Thomas Woolf, definitely. I want to get back into Thomas
Wolfe. Yes. One of my other favorite stories in Eudora Welty is The Petrified Man, which is essentially a story about a beauty shop and the connections between the women who frequent the beauty shop. And it actually inspired, when I was in history grad school, I was taking an oral history class, and a friend of mine and I decided to do and dreamed up this whole big project that wound up being much, much smaller than our dream was. But our project was going to be about how cultures of women in beauty shops mattered in the 50s and 60s, and before our time. By our time, we went in and got haircuts, and that was it. But back then, people would hang out, for ages with curlers in their hair or whatever. And so we both knew from our grandmothers that that's what people did and women did in, beauty shops back in the day. And there were beauty shops for white women, and there were beauty shops for Black women. And so my grandmother went to the white store, and my friend's grandmother was black. And so thinking that we had sort of ins for interviewing lots of women who went to these different communities and how they organized their societies seemed like a good project. And it wasn't very serious. It was just a small class project, but it was interesting. Yeah. And totally inspired by Welty.
Oh, yeah. I got to get back to that stuff, but there's so much that I do. Get through a few comments here. Thanks, Gareth. I love how these shows just become a general chat. John Deere, great at letting it run its own course. Yeah, well, I find it fun. If I didn't find it fun, I wouldn't be doing this. So it's a treat for me as well.
Andrew guess.
It's a bookish treat, but it's a treat for me as well. He's saying I would think King knows that he was an English major. So yeah, so he might.
Maybe so. Yeah, he certainly knew the Flannery O'Connor story and his were a piece. He was very aware of that. So yeah.
And Amy says, yeah, that he was an English teacher before. And
that is so cool. I had no idea that he was an English major and teacher.
Wonderful. Thank you both for the broadcast. Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us.
And we're not finished yet either.
Right.
Let's move on.
Okay. So the next book is a nice thick one, which, given that I have one that's super, super thin, having one really, really long one seems appropriate. And it's Hermione Lee's biography of Virginia Woolf. And I really love Hermione Lee's style of writing biographies. And in fact, this month, I think I'm going to be reading her biography of Edith Wharton, who we've mentioned a couple of times now. This one I read for March of the Mammoths, the first year of the pandemic, so 2020, when things were just really getting started. My son was coming home from college with one of his friends who was an international student whose parents lived away from the place she was from, and she did not have citizenship where her parents were working. So she couldn't go home. She didn't have family in one place and she couldn't get to the other. So she stayed with us. And so everything was in a total uproar. And so this book is so hooked in with that for me that I've sort of avoided going back to it. And I have almost no memory of it, which is just bizarre that I know I read it. But so I figured it's a writer I love, a subject I love, and long. So it seemed like a good choice. So technically a reread, but I'm not sure maybe I'll remember it when I start reading again. But yeah.
Mark says, yeah, he has to read that, and so do I, because I read Virginia Woolf in the past, and I enjoyed her, and I started. It was during the pandemic, I think, and I was going to start reading through chronologically. So the first one I read was it was at The Voyage Out, and there were parts that I extremely liked about it, and then there was parts that were like it seemed to get her writing seemed to get so good when the main character gets sick and just as she's dying. Those are so powerful, and there was good parts before, but it just seemed a little variable, and I hated the edition I was reading because it was the Wordsworth edition, and she'd mentioned because they're talking about books and authors, and so there'd be an end note. So I'd go to the end note and go, oh, I wonder if they pulled stuff from her letters, diaries, and all this kind of stuff, and it's like, no, it just gives the date of the author and their birth date. What use is that? I already know that. Well, I may not know the exact date, but I know who this author is.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah,
but yeah,
I read the biography partly because I was about to review. Actually, this is a funny coincidence too that I was about to review a new edition, an annotated edition of Mrs. Dalloway that was annotated by Merve Imre, who I mentioned earlier, whose class I'm about to take, online class. And that book, reading it that month when the pandemic was becoming such a big thing, really made me see how much that book is about the Spanish flu. That was almost invisible to me beforehand. I thought about how World War I was affected, but I had not been aware of how much the flu shaped that book. So yeah, she's definitely one who writes beautifully about illness and the effects of illness on a person's personality.
Yeah, that's interesting because I've read Mrs. Dalloway, but yeah, I don't think I ever caught any references to the pandemic or the Spanish flu. I was only thinking of another writer. I can't remember her name. It was Kate something. Porter.
Catherine Ann Porter, another Southern writer.
And what's her story? Like, she's one of the few that really digs it, like a short story, and I can't remember the name of it, but that's really good.
Yeah, I should remember the name of it. I have a bind of it on my shelf, but
yeah, it's really good. Didn't Hermione, like, I really want to read that. So, but does it say what other biography she's written? There's somebody else that I came across that she did one, and I can't remember what that is.
Okay, like, so there's Willa Cather, which is just a really nicely done one.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Bowen. She did Penelope Fitzgerald, I think. And then, of course, her new one is Philip Roth.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know I can't remember what. Maybe it was Elizabeth Bowen that I think that was it, because I read something about it because I was reading I did reread some of Elizabeth Bowen, and I think I came across that. But yeah, it's like I've never read anything by Hermione Lee, and it's like everything I hear is good stuff. So I definitely have to do it.
Well, I think she's got a real knack for combining a study of sort of the personal life and the psychology or personality and real analysis of the stories or the novels as well, more than some literary biographers. And she doesn't try to say, oh, this must have happened because it happened in her life, because it happens in her book, which occasionally I get really annoyed when I read authors who do that. But nevertheless, saying, oh, this theme would have been important in her life, and here's how it got enacted in the story, works quite well. So yeah, I'm quite fond of her work.
And Mark says the same thing as me, Willa Cather. Yeah. That's another one.
Her biography of Willa Cather is wonderful, but she does make one huge slip, which is she talks about one of Cather's loves very early in her life, but manages to miss that she had, a 40-year relationship or something with another woman. And she just sort of poo-poos it as not real. And I mean, more evidence has been explored since she wrote, but still that was a miss. But yes, Willa Cather is a really interesting writer.
And I remember watching going back to Virginia Woolf, one of her I forget who it was that's basically she based Orlando on. And I remember the book was, oh, that wasn't a real, they were just friends.
Right. Vita Sackville West, I assume?
Yes. Vita Sackville West, yeah.
There's a brand new book about Vita Sackville West and gardening that I'm really eager to read. So it's another side of her.
Maybe you mentioned, somebody mentioned that, and I just went, what? And I remember maybe it was. Did you mention it on one of your videos?
Yeah, I just did a video a couple of days ago about books that are forthcoming, and mentioned that one. But other people may have mentioned it too.
Yeah, I heard it somewhere, and I just went, "What?"
Well, I've read a couple of Sackville West's books before, novels, short novellas, somewhere between a novella and a novel, maybe, before. But it's been a really long time, and I would love to pick those up again sometime.
Yeah, I think is it Virago that has done some really nice editions, like really good, cool covers on them. And
Yep, with the like sketches or something, kind of.
Yeah,
sketches may be the wrong word, but yeah, I like this.
So I'm not sure how many books we're in, but we should be.
I have 2 more. I actually have 3 more, but one of them I don't have a physical copy of with me. I couldn't find it, but we'll get to that. So
Mark is saying he's got volume with Sissinghurst Gardens. That's maybe where I was making the connection or something. I'm not sure.
Did Nicholson write the Sissinghurst book? Is that right? I haven't read it, but it's been on my list.
Harold Nicholson?
I can't remember his first name.
For the publisher and the politician, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Okay, so I mentioned earlier at the very beginning that if I were actually packing, that I would have these super big books, and this is one of them. It's the collected Shakespeare.
The Oxford. I've not seen that one.
This one has an interesting backstory, this particular edition. This is the New Oxford Shakespeare, and it came out in 2017, at least in the US. It might have been a little earlier before. And that's the year my son graduated. My son was an absolute Shakespeare freak. This book came out, and there's a big online source, but then there are also 3 other volumes, and they're critical materials, and some that are new and some that are substantially older, but it's collecting a lot of primary sources even about that Shakespeare may have referred to and things like that. So it's just an incredible amount of background material. And I'll talk about my son just slightly more in just a second. But when I was chatting with him about taking this, he said 2 things. One was that Shakespeare was a great option because Shakespeare writes so much about shipwrecks. And I know a lot of your guests have talked about Prospero and the Tempest, and actually being on a deserted island, but just the amount of shipwrecks is just astonishing in this, even when it's to some island that's not deserted. So he thought that would be appropriate. And then he said, so if he were going, that all 4 volumes of this one and the 3 background books, I can't remember exactly why there are 3, that they're divided up in some way. But anyway, that was my high school graduation present to him, were these 4 volumes. And those are the 4 of the 10 that he would take. So yes. So
I definitely would want, though, that would suffice for me for everything I think I want about Shakespeare, those 4 volumes.
Yeah.
They're going on my wish list, people.
Yes. Yes. Well, next time you graduate from high school, maybe someone will be kind enough to.
I'll enroll shortly.
So I read a tiny bit of Shakespeare as a youngster. I think we read Macbeth, which is, I think, your favorite, and Julius Caesar and Romeo and Juliet when I was in high school. We read them aloud. Nobody knew anything about what was going on. We didn't read them aloud with any understanding. No one had read them at all beforehand. Our teacher didn't seem to really get them. They were just the sort of shrunken down, abbreviated versions that were in the school textbook. Fine. I went to college and didn't read any Shakespeare. I majored in history rather than literature, which was a mistake. But I realized if I majored in English, I would have to learn a second foreign language, so 2 foreign languages. And I was too scared to do that. I was, as I said, I was in New England and I had this Southern accent. So whenever I was speaking French in my French class, everyone would say, "Where are you from?" And I would say, Southern France.
Yeah.
But so I didn't take anything that required any Shakespeare classes, but a bunch of my friends were musicians or theater people. And one of my friends was playing in the pit for plays, and they were putting on The Winter's Tale, and I went and saw it and loved it, which is not a common Shakespeare play, but I loved it. But I never read any Shakespeare after that until my son was a kid. And it's a little bit more complicated than this, but essentially when he was a kindergartner, he was homeschooling, and an older kid in this neighborhood wanted to put on a play. And so he was in 9th grade at the time, I think. And he wrote a cut of the script that was half an hour. And then he got all the homeschoolers that he could find to be in it. Some that were close to his age, but then a whole lot of kindergartners. And so Abe, my son, was Jaques, the old man, and he had a pillow and that he used as his belly, and he had a pair of old granny glasses for me, and with the lenses popped out, and did the 7 Ages of Man speech, and he absolutely adored it, and he got obsessed. Actually, we had seen one earlier thing. We had gone to a community production of Midsummer Night's Dream at the Shakespeare Theater Company. Every year they would have an outdoor performance that was free for everyone. And my husband's parents were coming in town, and we wanted something inexpensive to do with them that would be exciting. And so we took Abe, and to prepare him for it, thinking that he might be bored. He was probably 4 at the time, maybe. Yeah, he's probably 4. And so we showed him a movie version and a little kiddie version as well. And he basically had memorized the play. He watched that. It was the movie version with the Stanley Tucci as Puck riding a bicycle. And so he would always say, "I want to see the bicycle show." So he would watch this version we had checked out of the library and tape over and over and over. So we got there, we sat down, Abe was sitting in my lap, he was still that young. And basically, as the actors were saying all of the lines, he was repeating them out loud, and I was having to say, "Shh, shh."
4 years old. 4 years old.
He was 4 years old. And I knew nothing about Shakespeare. I knew that Shakespeare wrote a lot of tragedies. I knew he wrote some histories. I don't think I really knew he wrote any comedies until then, which was a big learning experience. But my son got obsessed. My brother actually liked Shakespeare too. And he was in several plays when he was young. The same young man who did the shortcuts of the plays for homeschoolers did it for several years. And then Abe went to a couple of different Shakespeare camps, and eventually taught in one. He was in a couple of plays in college, and then was the head of the Shakespeare organization and directed a play. And now he's 25, I think. And he's a sound engineer, and so he's done some sound engineering for some Shakespeare plays as well. But he's given papers. He wrote a senior thesis on it. He gave a paper at a big conference. He's a Shakespeare nerd all the way through, and he's guested on my channel a couple of times talking about Shakespeare. But so he's introduced me to a lot of it. And one of the things he loved was seeing any play performed. And so because we live in an area where there's the Folger Shakespeare Library and Theater, which puts on several plays a year, and the Shakespeare Theater Company, which puts on several shows per year. And just a couple of hours away, there's the American Shakespeare Center, which is a recreation of the Blackfriars, Shakespeare's indoor theater. And they put on, it's a repertory theater. So you can go for one weekend and see 4 different plays. And so we went there a lot. It's this tiny little place and a tiny community as well as a tiny theater. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful thing. So he had seen, I guess by the start of his freshman year, of his senior year of high school, he had seen all but a couple of the plays on stage. And we figured out ways to make it sure that he got to see all of them, but by the time he graduated. And his last one, I think he saw while he was in the UK at the Globe. So yes, so I've now seen all of the plays staged, which is for someone who knew absolutely nothing until I had a kid. Getting to see all of them staged has been pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and I've not seen any, even though like I was in Stratford upon Avon, and I couldn't get tickets to anything because they're booked ahead so far. In Canada, there's Stratford outside of where I used to live. That Alec Guinness actually was one of the people that helped get it started.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
There. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was him. I'm sure it was Alec Guinness, but I never got there to Edison, and I never got to the Globe yet in London, and it's like I've never seen any of them, and I really want to.
It's such an interesting experience. I think the way they're performed, the way they used to be performed, and the way they're performed now is so different from the way it was performed when we were younger, where they tended to be, at least in the US, tended to be fairly straight-laced, high, upper level, fancy, and as opposed to the just body humor and very, designed for everybody. That Shakespeare knew that he had a really diverse audience, and he's playing to everybody. It doesn't have to be fancy. So it's always fun to see them performed. And a lot of times they're performed by using Shakespeare's language, but pretending like it's, I don't know, set in 1960s Bohemia or whatever, things that are not necessarily the real settings, original settings.
Yeah, I won't go into the Macbeth is my favorite for many reasons, but I went over it so many times, and and including the Orson Welles film, I just love. So I just have to.
And I've never seen that. I've seen so little on screen. When I was watching some of your back episodes, thinking, if I talk about Shakespeare, he's going to talk about movies, and I didn't even realize that I had seen so little on screen.
Yeah, there's a lot of good ones, like the BBC ones that did it, and then there's audio ones that I've listened to. See, I've seen a lot, like the BBC ones have done like every one with people like Leonard Rossiter. What's the he was with Cook and I can't think of his name. He did the Body in Question series, and he was part of that group with Alan Bennett, the group. But he directed a lot of those as well. I can't think of his name, but somebody will know, and it'll probably show up in comments at some point. But yeah, so I won't go into details of Macbeth again because I've done it many times. Just go with here. And James saying, he says, I know we heard the Emily Dickinson thing about it wasn't Yellow Rose of Texas.
It wasn't Yellow Rose of Texas. So.
but maybe
It's a
that'll work.
different appropriate song for this particular discussion.
And Summer saying she's late, going to have to rewatch from the beginning.
I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, and Mark says his son and buddies were discussing the end, and how they're in high school, and Abe was 4 years old, memorizing these plays. That's just amazing.
Well, Romeo and Juliet has never been his favorite.
No, okay. Jenny says never read Shakespeare either. I have a lot of educating to do.
Well, it can be a lifetime adventure. So.
Sandra is saying he really likes that edition, I guess, that you got there. I have to get that at some point.
There's this is the Oxford, but there's a Norton one as well that's quite nice. That Stephen Greenblatt, who wrote Will in the World and has done a lot of Shakespeare scholarship, I think does a lot of the annotations for that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's other series that is really good, and I can't remember what it is.
There's a fairly new one out from RSC, and there's the Riverside, of course. Yeah,
they were doing individual volumes.
Oh,
Starts with A.
Say it again.
Starts with A.
Right? I'm trying to think of the name of the most Arden. The Arden ones.
That's
Arden.
That's the one.
Yeah. I actually love the Folgers. The Folger is the local theater, but they put out these little mass market paperback size ones that are $5 a piece or so, that have really nice notes and introductions and themes. And if you're carrying around a book to a class and wanting to be able to write in it, they are totally the way to go.
Yeah, Amy's talking to say, despite having been to Stratford, Ontario many times, I've yet to see a live Shakespeare play. It's because I'd always been there, and I went to, there were some bookshops there. There were going into it. You have Shakespeare is another little town that's going into it, and they'd have antique shops with some books in and stuff. Always stopped there on the way to London, Ontario. Never went to the Playhouse.
Oh, I would love to go. Have you seen the series Swords? What's it called? Slings and Arrows.
Don't think so.
I think it takes place in Stratford, in Canada, and it's just hysterical. It's about a Shakespearean troupe that are staging plays and in the theater. It's great. I haven't seen it in a while, but yeah.
There's Leona. Is it? No, not. I was gonna say Leona Boyd, but no. There's a singer, a popular singer, or she is popular, but she doesn't really do popular music. But she lives there. Again, I get these memories, but I can't remember the names. Thanks, Sandra. Peter Greenway. Is that the annotator, or I'm not sure what Puba is referring to there. The Martin Shaw Macbeth had a real impact. Is that the BBC one? That must be the BBC one, because he also played detective on TV. He played Dalgleish.
Oh, wow!
Oh, excuse me.
I've only seen maybe one or two of those. So,
there's many Dalgleish. There's different actors. There's a new one that's pretty good too. A poet policeman. Arden. Use Folgers that are used their yearly Shakespeare readings.
Yeah. I think they make both the miniature size, the mass markets, and the fuller size as well. Actually, my son, my Shakespeare source of all Shakespeare knowledge, is won a sonnet contest where he had to write a contemporary sonnet. He was, I don't know, 9th grade or 10th grade or something, and the prize was a complete collection of the mass market size Folgers, and so they're all lined up, and they're colorful, and they're all lined up on the shelves over there. I'm actually in my son's room, so yeah, it's always nice to see those.
Jenny says, "Do you like the modern versions of Shakespeare, like 10 Things I Hate About You and Get Over?" I don't know that.
I have enjoyed them a lot. There's something I don't always like modern adaptations of things, but for Shakespeare somehow it just always works. Partly because they're so playful and that it's so easy to play around with them, and so yeah, I'm trying to remember some of the ones I've especially enjoyed, and I'm blanking at the moment. But yeah, actually, I mentioned much earlier, I think when I was talking about 84 Charing Cross Road, that I have this gang of friends. And one of the things that we've done is every summer we've had an outdoor movie night once a week. And there's always a theme. And so someone hangs up a sheet on their from their balcony, and then we project the movie on it. And then we sit in little camp chairs and all watch. And sometimes it's always about baseball or whatever. There's always a theme. Heist movies, but one year it was Shakespeare retellings. So no real Shakespeare. They had to be retellings, and it was so much fun.
Marcus said he used the trade, I guess, of the Folger size.
Yep.
And Amy says 10 Things I Hate About You is
a
classic. Yeah, I don't think I don't know that one. Oh, I just remembered. I think it's Lorena McKinnon who lives.
Oh yeah.
In Stratford.
And she's the Wuthering Heights. No, she's not the Wuthering Heights. What she did something kind of interesting that was related to.
Yeah, she did Celtic kind of stuff. You're thinking of Bush.
Yeah, but Lorena McKinnon did something that was related to literature, I think, too.
Yeah, I used to have CDs of hers. Yeah, I can't think of it off the top of my head. But yeah, you know, I'm pretty sure it's her that lives there. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that or did live there, I should say, because who knows where anybody lives now? I don't know. It's 20 years since I've been there. So.
Yeah, I would love to go. Yeah. Yeah,
well, it's nice. But there's another place that does sort of Shaw type stuff. It's on the there's another theater that I saw some plays there. I forget what it's called. It's something on the lake, but it's Shaw, I think. It's something to do with Bernard Shaw. There's another place in Ontario, but I can't think of what it is. But yeah, so let's move on. This should be is this the last one, or
the second to last one, actually? This is a Library of America copy of Sarah Orne Jewett's collected stories and novels. She writes very short stories, and she's from Maine. And most of these, I guess the first books I talked about were all things I had known since my own childhood, and then Shakespeare from my son's childhood. And this one I discovered very, very recently. Right after my husband died, some friends of mine invited me up to their cabin in Maine, which one of them was the great-grandchild of someone who built the cabin. And I had been to Maine as a little girl, but I had never really read Sarah Orne Jewett at all. And while I was going up, I thought, I'm going to find some classic Maine literature. And I thought, I've heard of Sarah Orne Jewett, and I think I might have read Pointed Firs, but I was wrong. So I checked it out at the library and took a copy up, and absolutely fell in love with Country of Pointed Firs, which is her very short book that is the story of a woman going to Maine to write a book, and she's talking with all the people she meets, and it's a very quiet, non-plot driven and calm book, which I absolutely adored, and really took me by surprise how much I loved it. And so I immediately got a little obsessed, and I read biographies of her, and all the critical work I could find on her. And then last October, I went a second time. The first time I did this was 2 Octobers ago. And last October, I read one of her other novels and really enjoyed it. And Steve Donahue was kind enough to find a copy at the Brattle of this slipcovered Library of America edition. And so I would take it.
Don't let him near slip cases.
Yes, he was careful with mine. So.
Yeah, like when I saw that on the list, it's like it bugged me until I actually looked her up, because I was like, I know that name, and then all of a sudden I realized who she was. Not read anything, and I don't know why. Again, it's like the name was familiar, but just never got around to reading her.
Yeah, well, she's she's an author who is fairly widely known, but not a superstar by any means. She's an American writer from Maine who spent half of her year as an adult. She spent half of her year in Boston, and was in what many people call the first Boston marriage between two women who committed to each other. And we don't really know about the romantic life or the sex lives of women in Boston marriages. Often they were older women who combined forces to be able to live together alone without being married to a man, and yet still be financially able and just pooling their resources. But many clearly had romantic, at least, bonds as well. Some had commitment ceremonies where all their friends would come. Many wore each other's rings. So it's something that's different from a clear lesbian relationship. Some of them may have been, some of them may not have been. We really just don't know. But so many people say she was the first, in one of the first Boston marriages, as was Henry James's sister, I believe.
Oh yeah, I remember reading something about that. Yeah,
and yeah, she's just lovely. She also probably inspired Willa Cather. One of the things that she was part of the sort of regionalism school of writing about particular areas and particular cultures within the U.S. And I think she inspired quite a number, especially of other women, to write about the worlds that they knew, that they lived in. And so Willa Cather was writing about the prairie and the West, and that's partly because Sarah Orne Jewett said, essentially, write about where you know, the society that is, don't try to create literature that looks like Henry James, which is what Willa Cather had done earlier, and instead write about something that's different, and that you have something to say about, that that other people might not.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons I think I like Catherine Ann Porter too, because she's very, very much that way too. It's like they seem to be familiar stories, but they're not. Like, or at least not to me so much. It's maybe it's just the way she tells them, but yeah, I really like them.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of Southern literature sort of came out of that, thinking about how much talking about region can matter, and the culture of particular regions.
And Mark says, yeah, he grew up with her books and home.
Yes. I so wish I had. But, I'm not sure what I would have made of her, actually, as a young person.
Is that Library of America all her stuff? Is that complete?
No. I know A Marsh Island is not in here, I think.
That's probably a good place to start, anyway.
Yeah, a country appointed first is definitely the place to start. A Country Doctor is sort of a lovely talk about her. Essentially, it's not really her, but her father, Sarah Orne Jewett's father, was a doctor, and she traveled around with him and went to appointments, and it's essentially that kind of story of someone interacting with a variety of people within the community. And that's kind of a nice read. A lot of these are short stories, but Country Appointed Furs is her masterpiece, I think. I don't know if she has any extant nonfiction. I don't know. I see Richard Richardson Reed saying that I still have all the old volumes, which I'm so envious. Wow. There's a brand new version that's just been a new publication. I can't remember, Smith and Taylor Classics. It's a brand new imprint that have released only paperbacks, but there was an Edith Wharton story, Twilight Sleep, and Gissing's Odd Women, I think, and Sarah Orne Jewett's Country Appointed Furs. I'm not sure, I can't remember what the fourth one was, but each one has, instead of an introduction, has a conversation between two new writers or scholars talking to each other about the book. I wasn't fully persuaded by the conversations I read, but it's pretty interesting. So yeah. Exactly. Sarah Orne Jewett. Her last name is Jewett.
So yeah, and like I say, I haven't read her, so there's not much I can say about her that much, but other than wanting to.
Yeah. And I definitely recommend her, but do recognize that it's very quiet.
Thanks, Mark.
And very not plot driven. And maybe in some ways, like Jane Austen, it's not like Jane Austen at all in tone, but it is focusing pretty specifically on the experiences of women within the community. And I think if you go in sort of knowing that that's who she is and what she's doing, that it won't come across as romance in any way. But it's worth knowing that. Okay, so for the last book, I was sure I knew where this book was. Like I said, I'm filming in my son's room, and his bookcases are all over there. And I was sure that the whole line of this author were all lined up on the second to bottom shelf, and they are not there. That space is being used by something else. And so I'm not sure where they are, so I don't have it with me. But it's Swallows and Amazons by Arthur Ransom. So I've given you, let's see, poetry, letters, novel, stories, biography, plays, a novella. We'll call that a novella. And this is a children's book. And it's a children's book from Britain about a family of kids, not on a desert island, but who make a little home on an island that their parents can sort of see from their house. But they sail their little boat and camp out for the summer and have a real adventure with another set of kids from another family. And while they're having their real adventure, they also have a pretend adventure. And it's this wonderfully warm story. First of all, they're making hot tea on the island, and it's a very domestic kind of adventure in certain ways. But it's also all about sailing, and just, it's wonderful. And they have these two families have a serious competition where they are having a race, and it's about racing as hard as you possibly can against these other people. And then the second one wins, they're totally cheering each other on. They're so happy and saying, you did such a great job. That was just amazing. And, so it's so seeing them as opposed to, I think, what contemporary books would be, where these two groups competing against each other would be fighting, seeing these incredibly sweet, it would be such a reassuring thing. So yeah, life on an island and all of this comfort. Now, I discovered these books, actually, I guess right after my son was born. And I was poking around in the library, and the library closest to me, which is a 3-minute walk, had a really wonderful children's section and a really small, limited adult section. And I knew the children's librarian, and she was just brilliant and knew so much history of children's literature, and it was always tremendous fun to talk to her. And she said, "Oh, you should read the series." And they were old volumes of the Swallows and Amazons books. And so I checked out the first one. And I remember reading it while Abe was nursing, and I just loved the book. And then when he became old enough to read them himself, he fell in love with them. And I think he appreciated some of the boating stuff more than I did. He used to go to the playgrounds and start playing his versions of these stories. And all these other kids would start playing with him who did not know the book. Kids he didn't know. He would just sort of present the story that they were going to enact about kids camping, sailing and camping on an island and stuff. And so the entire city of Tacoma Park, which is my neighborhood right outside of DC, knows Swallows and Amazons, even though they didn't know it was a book. So that was, it wasn't a widely read book here then. And he then decided to live on a boat briefly, partly because of his falling in love with boats and messing around with boats, because of Swallows and Amazons.
Yeah, it's all set in the Lake District here in the UK, and yes. People say that it's very evocative of it. I've never been there, but I've read Swallows and Amazons, but I've never read any of the other books.
Well, some of the others are really great too. Coot Club was another one of his favorites. I think I loved Winter Holiday most after Swallows and Amazons.
I'm trying to think. There was a woman that wrote sort of that kind of thing with the children, I think in the Lake District as well. Can't think of her name. She wrote a whole series of books, but they're not. I've never read actually any of those, but people have told me they're not as good. They're sort of not a pastiche, I guess, but they cover the same ground. And I just can't think of the name again. I've been trying to think of it while you were talking there, but I just can't. But there's a lot, I think, that's set in, like Beatrix Potter lived in the Lake District as well. So her stuff is infused with that.
Well, I just ran across a book today online that I haven't read and haven't seen yet, but it's about and it's not new, but I don't know how old it is. It's about a woman who takes her kids on a sailboat every summer off the coast of British Columbia. And I keep thinking it sounds kind of lovely and similar in certain ways too, although, it's not the kids having an independent adventure, but it just couldn't happen to kids today. It just would never, at least in the US, that, no parents would say, "Oh yes, camp out on an island all summer."
Yeah, I think the same would be here. I think it would be the same. Amy's saying a childhood favorite of mine, one of the greatest adventure stories of the 20th century.
And when I watched I had picked out this whole list beforehand, but it was watching Amy's version of Your Tag where I was like, oh, we both have this. So, did you grow up with it, Amy?
Yeah, I forgot that she did that one. Yeah, we'll wait till she.
Yes.
Mark Yeah.
Mark, you will love it. Yeah. It's not a girl book or a boy book, but it is a ship book or a small boat book. So, yes.
Nippet Poobah, wasn't that the book that Golding had in mind when writing Lord of the Flies?
No. So, it's definitely an absolute opposite of Lord of the Flies, for sure. That's very funny.
Wooden Boat magazine recently did an in-depth appreciation of the author as a boatman.
Oh, I'm going to tell my son. Hold on.
That's it. Eden Blyton. Thanks, Amy. That's who I'm thinking of. Eden Blyton. Her stories.
Oh, yeah.
I forget what they're called now too, but they're very basically set there, and I've never read those, so I don't know how to.
I'm going to show my ignorance of children's lit in Britain, but did she do the
Famous Five? Yes, thanks.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Is she the one who did that? Okay.
Yeah, they've been sanitized now. I guess there's different versions out there because I was going to buy a set one time because I did this. Our stupid little thing was second childhood or something like that, because when I was a child I never really read childhood books, and I didn't read too much, so I wanted to sort of read some stuff, and everything that people have suggested I've really enjoyed, you know, and people have suggested that I might have actually read one of them, but I can't remember now. But it's just I went to buy a set of them and I realized that those were the ones that they've sanitized, so I don't want them.
Yeah. And it's taking out not current words and things.
Yeah. I don't know what they've done really, but just that they've done it is enough to not read them. Excellent choices, Sandra says. Various and colorful. Thanks for sharing these lovely books. I really enjoyed, Hannah. Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much.
Finished yet because we've got the music and luxury items.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Marcus said, well, I'll just try to catch up here. I'll try to get my kids to camp on an island so I can use their room for books. Yeah.
Send them off to college at some point. And yeah.
So Amy's saying it was, my local library had many old titles, including Swallows and Amazons, which I read when I was about 9 or 10. I think that's probably the perfect time to Yeah, Scott's here. Hello, Scott. The Castle Adventure by Eden Blyton is a comfort read. I do want to read them, but as I say, I want to get the original stories of them. The Three Goblins. Yeah, see, that definitely would not, they would want to get rid of that, as well. So as well as a few Famous Five ones. So they're not politically correct today, but so be it.
As long as you know when they're coming from.
Yeah. Okay, so we got music now.
Okay, so I was trying to decide between two things, and one is Bach lute suites performed on guitar by the guitarist John Williams, and that's music that, like some of these books, has been sort of a soundtrack of my life for ages and ages. That I wrote my senior thesis in college to them and did all of my studying in college to them. I nursed my baby while listening to Bach lute suites. You name it. The Bach lute suites has been this background music for me forever, and always keeps me calm. And I've been listening to it a lot in the last, is it 6 weeks already? No, it's not that long. Since Trump was actually since the election, I've listened to a lot of Bach lute suites, and it's really grounded me. And I thought, that might be nice. And then I decided a different choice, which is this book is this one is called Deep Roots, New Growth, and it's by Maelstrom. And you can see the folks
Are they bluegrass then, or
This one is my son.
Oh.
And so was his high school band, Maelstrom. They started playing together. The three of them all studied with the same fiddle teacher. Abe was taking classical violin and then taking Irish music lessons with another teacher, and that's where he met these three, the other two. And the three of them all, before they really knew each other well, all went to Ireland for a few weeks with parents in tow to study Irish music, to go to the Fleadh, which is a big celebration of Irish culture and dancing and things as well, not just music. But particularly to spend a week in a tiny town in Donegal. A tiny town is an overstatement. I think there were something like 10 times or 20 times as many sheep as people. I'm sure it's more than that, actually. Just huge numbers of sheep, and maybe 60 people. There were a few houses and a pub and a gas station, and that was about it.
Always a pub.
Always a pub. And we went to the pub every night to listen to music, because during the summer, there are huge music festivals there every year. And so there were both the people who came to learn, of which there were a few kids, but not in general, there are adults who come. And most of the kids are from relatively local places. And so to have these three American kids come was kind of an exciting thing. But they started playing together there, not just for the classes, but the three of them together, and playing music that was Irish, but also not always Irish. That they all came from different traditions and all had classical backgrounds to some degree too. And so they played some classical together, but they all had really good ears and could pick up whatever. And so some of the adults who were coming from other places. And so at night they would all jam together. And so Maelstrom, as they soon became known, that the kids hung out with these adults from France, for example, who would teach them their French folk music or whatever. So they just had a wonderful time playing together, and all playing just fiddle at the start, so it would be music for three fiddles. And as soon as they came home, they started playing for contra dances and folk festivals around the DC area, which has got a lot of folk culture, folk music celebrations, and various other kinds of gigs. And soon they were singing together, and Abe started playing guitar and banjo and bouzouki and everything else. And so this album is full of lively music, but it also has so many connections for me, and I've listened to it an awful lot. So I would love to take that. And I sent, this was a very small release, as you can imagine, for, early high school kids to put out. It was a fairly small release album. But they do have a small YouTube channel, which was mostly because we filmed some things. So when Abe applied to college, he could say, here's what I do, or whatever. And so I sent you by email a link of a few links to their songs. So
yeah,
so that's
I'll put it down in the description.
That'd be great. That would be great.
Yeah, give me about an hour, because sometimes it takes a little while for me to get into the file in order to add anything on YouTube. So it sometimes takes a little while for it to sync up for some reason.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to go look it up faster, it's Maelstrom, Maelstrom, like the weather, and I think it's Maelstrom Fiddlers is their website. So yeah, that's I think will be fun to listen to then.
Bill Rutenberg did something similar. He said he would take the music of his daughter singing.
Oh,
so that was good, and she's got a really good voice as well. So
that's wonderful.
Everybody else has chose, something else. So you are unique of choosing this. So That's cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward because I meant to look it up because I know the Bach lute suites, but the Maelstrom I didn't. I meant to look it up and I didn't, and then I don't know if I would have found it, but
you might have run across their YouTube channel or their Facebook channel or something because you knew the name of the album.
Yeah.
You might have been able to find it, but yeah. I don't think it's purchasable online at this point or anything like that.
Yeah. Jenni's saying I have them all. Like this is the famous 5 stuff on Kindle, and Bach. Gareth was getting ahead of himself, thinking that it was, and that's genius to use.
As you know, I like quiet books, so quiet music, it sort of makes sense.
From your son's band makes perfect sense. You're taking them with you. The best mom, Sadra says. And Amy, I kind of agree with this. 20 times as many sheep as people sounds like an ideal holiday.
I'm a knitter, so it was especially nice because my husband and I would walk, even if it was an hour away, there would be some weaving studio or something or knitting studio. And so it was just glorious.
But it's amazing that there's a pub with 60 people.
Yeah. And it was packed every night, and the entire town was there. So it was amazing.
That's amazing. Yeah. But like, as long as there's a pub, everything's fine. And especially music, that would be cool to go to. Like, you don't get those kind of pubs very often anymore here, probably on the countryside. But, if you're in a town or city here, they put football on, they put, or piped in music, loud music all the time. And I don't like that.
Well, people did mention that the amount of traditional music was so much higher during the summer when the musicians were there studying than it was during the winter, that they would play more, contemporary music of whatever sort. And nobody was getting drunk. It was not like this huge high drinking thing, but it was incredibly social, and it was great. It was a lovely week. Actually, David and I, while we were there, while the kids were in their classes, David and I read aloud James Joyce to each other. So we got through about half of Ulysses. During the day, we would read a chapter aloud, and then each of us would read an assortment of commentaries about the chapter, and then we would talk about it. Or maybe we read them first and then read the chapter afterwards. I can't remember, but that was a lot of fun too.
Gareth says, there are still live music in pubs, but they're few and far between, at least from where I've lived. They're few and far.
And I assume you're gigging in them rather than giggling in them.
Yeah.
That's great.
Just imagine you looking at the sheep and saying jumper, socks, scarf, hat.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I came back with some yarn.
Thinking of pubs, it reminds me of I forget where it is. I'm not sure if it's a specific essay that Orwell's written about pubs. Like there's some writing that he did about pubs, of saying what the really good English pub is. And it's like that was even past at his time, it wasn't happening. And because I think it's got to do with coming up for air. Is that coming? Yeah, it's like the guy goes home and he goes to pubs and he's railing against how everything's been gentrified and all this kind of stuff. But I'm sure Orwell's written an essay on what the English pub should be.
His essays are amazing.
Well, yeah.
That would make sense for me to read right now. Actually, that would be good.
Yeah, I like his fiction, but I like the nonfiction much more. It's like I like Coming Up for Air and stuff, but 1984 I understand, and Animal Farm, but they're not that well written in comparison to his other stuff. But
I think I have a copy of his diaries that I picked up at a little free library. I love his essays, But I haven't read the diaries, but I think I picked up a copy. So
They're cool to read because especially when he's in Northern Africa, and he's writing his essays on such were the joys of a boys' school thing, is inside the whale essays in the Dickens essay, and it's really interesting. And then when he's up in Wigan Pier and other places, and then you read what he's written in those books, like in Wigan Pier, and you realize that he's mixed stuff up, like he's taken stuff from here. It's like he put scenes together of things that happened together that never really happened in real life. So people, really rail against, or some people have railed against that. But it's because they say, well, it's not journalism anymore. But it's like, it's not what happened. It's what the meaning of these things are happening together that actually, that's what he's trying to say, or at least that's how I see it. I've got the 20-volume set of all
wow.
this stuff.
Wow.
Paperback, though, I've got a few hardcovers, but I got the paperback set. So, and I was reading through it, but I've left it it's all chronological. I think I've got 4 or 5 volumes in of the nonfiction, and I've got to get back to it someday.
A lot of it left. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I like to giggle too. Giggles. I'm always on a mission to make my drummer laugh at my gigs, so she giggles a lot. So
that's nice.
We are winding this down with your luxury item.
Yes. Well, when I put my list together of 8 books and the 1 CD/2 CDs that I mentioned, I figured out my luxury item and I wrote it down. And then I saw your thumbnail and realized how appropriate my choice was.
A typewriter?
No, not a typewriter. A sun hat.
Yeah.
I have pale skin and I burn very easily. And I think years on, the only way I was going to survive is to have on a desert island, is to have a nice big sun hat. So yes, I'm going to bring my sun hat.
You could make one out of palm fronds, and then just keep making
Yes, I probably could. And especially since I know how to knit, I might could figure out how to weave well enough to do it. But I might need something covering my head while I make it. So yeah.
Yeah, I remember somebody, I can't remember who it was that wanted, it was Greg at another Bibliophile Reads, I think, that brought toilet paper. And I'm going, why?
Yeah.
It's a luxury item.
I can live without that. Yes.
Yeah. There's big palm fronds, You can do that. You got the ocean. You don't need, just think that you're French and it's a big open bidet.
Yep. You're all alone. Yeah.
But a hat I can't understand because I burn badly as well. So no, this was fun.
Oh, it was wonderful. Thank you so much.
And 2 hours, we're getting close to 2 hours and 20.
Oh my goodness.
45 minutes.
Wow.
But it goes fast. That's the thing.
It does.
It goes really fast.
Yeah. And I love the live aspect of it. These will be a lot of fun to watch. Yeah.
Amy says here, as someone with pale skin who also burns easily, I think the hat is great. Yeah.
Well, it's practical, but it's also, it just, that's the style that shows in your thumbnail of it's still a luxury. So yeah.
And also too, it looks like it's made out of nice material. So if it was cloudy, you could go fishing with it or put fish in it and bring it back.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, it's I think the water would drain out, but the fish would certainly hold. And it's pretty sturdy and a little stretchy. Yeah. If it gets too hot, it might be too hot, but still.
Well, thank
you so much for coming, Amy, and everybody else. I appreciate it. This was wonderful, Shawn.
Yeah, every Sunday, or at least for March, and I'm going to set up April's about the middle of the month. So I now have a schedule. So next Sunday is going to be Gavin at Genre Reads.
Wonderful.
And then the weekend after that is, I think, Jenni.
Oh, yay.
Yeah, I think, or are you, or is it Debs and then Jenni? I can't remember now.
You've just got a great lineup. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Let me go back here. I was looking forward to the rest of season 2. Yeah, I'm hoping it continues because there's a lot of new booktubers too that haven't done this. Or well, they weren't around when I was doing it, so they're fresh meat. And then there's other ones that I never got around to doing, like yourself. That's why you were the first choice for this one, because I know we talked about it and saying yeah, and I wasn't sure if I was going to do it again, but yeah, that's why.
Yeah.
Having the
I think when you were doing it before, my life was just kind of crazy, and I couldn't do it. But yeah,
having the sun hat on, you can also read your 8 books everywhere on the island.
Yes, indeed.
Some ideas for my turn. Yeah, get that list, Jenni. And thanks, Scott, and just continue these. Can't get enough of them. Educational and fun. They are fun. And I'm finding I'm having difficulty doing pre-recorded videos, but I love doing lives. And this weekend, what have I done now? I've done 5.5 hours of live.
Oh my goodness. Oh yeah, because you're 1001 Nights.
Yeah, we did that earlier.
That's right.
That was an hour. And then we did the Simac one yesterday, and then Scott and I did one earlier, and so it's like 5.5 hours of lives.
Mm-hmm.
But that's that. I hope I it's been okay, but I don't want to repeat that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So again, everybody, thank you for coming, and this was a great,
wonderful beginning. Thank you so much.
So stick around for a bit, Hannah, once I finish here. But again, thanks everybody.
Okay.